Hello, my name is Paul Dean and welcome to Introduction to Outdoor Leadership Skills, Plant Identification. A little bit about me. I'm a retired professional forester. I'm an assistant scoutmaster in Troop 209 in Apex, North Carolina. This video is focused primarily on plants and trees in the central North Carolina area. Here are the goals for this course. What I hope to do today is explain the role of plants in nature, help you develop strategies and methods to teach plant identification to scouts, discuss the seasonal plants and the trees in our area, which is pretty much central North Carolina, help you identify and explain the treatment to exposure of certain poisonous plants, which most of the ones here that everybody's familiar with is always poison ivy, poison oak, but we'll cover that. And then most importantly, just tell you some of the ways I think, and the way I do, how you can help instill interest and respect and understanding of trees, plants, and vegetation in our environment. Here are the requirements right out of the Scout book. Identify and show evidence of at least 10 kinds of native plants found in your local area or campsite location. You may show evidence by fallen leaves or fallen fruit that you can find in the field or as part of a collection you have made, or by photographs that you have taken. The second one here is describe common poisonous plants or hazardous plants. Identify any that grow in your local area or campsite location and tell how to treat exposure to them. So I'm going to start off pretty much with identifying plants, which pretty much is the most difficult part of identifying all the different plant and vegetation in our area. Now, what is the role of plants in nature? I would hope yourself and scouts by this time have heard of photosynthesis. So what is photosynthesis? Well, it's the process by which plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, that CO2 we hear a lot about, to create oxygen and energy in the form of sugar. So we're getting some oxygen and sugar from the plants. And they're so important because plants are the primary producers of the chemically stored energy that we consume as food. You've heard of the food cycle, hadn't you? So in this diagram you can see the diagram of the sun. There's algae that it's doing it. The whole food cycle leads to food. You got the grass that the cows eat, and we eat the cows. But that's the big thing. That the one thing you can tell them is a story that got me, that I got from a professor when I was at Auburn. We're standing out in the field and he takes off his hat and he starts jumping up in the air, kind of grabbing at the sun. And we looked at each other and said, is he okay? What's wrong with him? But then he said, look, I can see the sun, I can feel the sun, but that's it. Plants take that sun in the form of energy and convert it into food or matter. So they grow leaves, the leaves drop to the ground, that nourishes the soil, but also the plant itself is food. So the big message you can tell the scouts is that is the whole process without plants, it converts sun energy into matter. Here's another important point that you need to try to convey to the scouts is about diversity. And looking at this chart, you'll notice we got all these different types of plants that live under the most bizarre conditions. If you're looking at your mosses, how they can live in some really difficult situations, and you got your ferns, and ferns are pretty old. When you're looking at a fern, you're looking at a plant that hasn't changed much at all since the days of the dinosaur. But plants and trees over time continue to evolve and become more adaptive, but it's not an overnight thing. But plants, trees, everything, they thrive in a really diverse amount of habitats. Well, now it's time to get into the heart of tree identification and the requirement. But as I've mentioned before, this requirement as listed here is per requirement they must be able to identify or show evidence done during a hike in a park or forest. Actually, that's the preferred way I think it should be done. But over time, it's gotten to where now with smartphones and lack of chances to be out of doors, they can use photographs. But I'm going to dig in detail pretty much now the heart of tree identification that I hope you'd be able to use. Plant identification basics. You must be able to know the plant parts. You need to be able to observe their outward phenotype. That's the technical term. So for example, a human phenotype is your observable traits like your eye color, your height, your skin color, whether you're bald or not like me. But tree phenotype, you're talking the traits like the leaf shape, the bark color, the branch pattern. We'll get about opposite or alternate, evergreen or deciduous. If it's evergreen, it means it's green year-round. Deciduous means it drops its leaves periodically, usually during the fall. But you need to be able to recognize and distinguish trees by discernible traits in order to identify the species, and that's what we're going to talk more about. Traditional plant identification tools, and I say the term traditional because there's a lot more tools that have come out, but this is in the book, and this is mainly what you should focus on first, are these dichotomous tree keys. And I'm talking mainly about tree keys. There are plant keys, but the focus of this and what a lot you'll be doing are with trees. If you notice in a diagram, it's a series of questions that you will be asked while looking at the leaf or twig, and that's why you need to know the phenotype or its outward appearance on what you call it. And by looking at it, then you step through this key answering a series of questions, and it'll then direct you to another series of questions that will narrow it down to that particular species. That's how a key works, but you must be able to recognize the different traits, is what we're going to cover in more detail now. Let's get started with leaf shapes. We have needle-like, familiar with pine, scale-like, red cedars, you'll see cedars, that's a common tree. Straight could be a willow, whatever, but notice that's the shape. Oblong, elliptical, lance, which to me thinks of like a sword, spatulate, like a spatula, and then heart shape, redbud, that's a common tree, but notice the shape of the leaves here. This is what you got to be able to recognize and understand as you'll be going through a tree or a leaf key. Leaf arrangement. So how are the leaves arranged? They can be in bundles. That top one, that is a pine. The bundle at the bottom, how it's all together, is called a fascicle. You can have alternate. The most common alternate are sweet gum, oaks, those, and hickories are alternate in their leaf arrangement. Whorled is when they're all in a circle. You look at where all the leaves are attached in a circle. That is common for eastern white pine. And opposite, we're talking maple, and ash and dogwood. Those are tree species that have opposite leaf arrangements. Leaf types. So what type of leaf are you looking at? The leaf can either be simple, which is just a plain single leaf simply attached to the branch, or it can be compound. Compound is leaves upon a leaf, so that makes it a compound leaf. So in this picture you see an example of a simple leaf, and then you see a compound leaf, two of them. There's feather-like compound, which looks like a big old long feather because you see one long petiole, which is that stem in the middle with multiple leaves on it. So that is a leaf on a leaf. Then the other is palm-like. Think of your hand, the palm of your hand, how you're looking at your palm, and each of your fingers radiate outward from the center of your wrist. Well, the petiole of palm-like trees, you see the petiole, and then finger-like projections, palm-like. Most common palm-like tree around here is sycamore. So when you come across a palm-like leaf, chances are, if you go through the key, that's what that will be. Leaf veins. Yes. Trees, leaves have veins. Here again you see palm-like. Notice how they're radiating out palm-like veins from that one centered petiole. Feather-like. That's another common type of veins you'll see in different species. Curved. What comes to mind in the curved is flowering dogwood. That's actually a tree that's opposite in its leaf arrangement and has curved venation. Parallel, not sure of any that comes to mind, but that's another shape that you look for. Fan shape, there's only one that I know called ginkgo. That's one of the oldest plants around that hadn't changed since the days of the dinosaurs. So you'll see ginkgo trees periodically people's yards. They're more like a ornamental tree, but that's the different type of leaf veins. I've covered a lot, but this is the complete anatomy of a leaf, and as you look at that, you'll see some of these similar terms of the different features of a leaf. Notice, you see the stem. Some of them have glands at the bottom of it. Now this will get to where when you go into broadleafs and go even more detail to get down to the exact species, you'll have to know these different descriptions of the parts. But this is all of them, but a lot of the ones that you'll see with oaks, they'll talk about the sinuses, which is that deep area going to the leaf, and the actual lobes. So some trees have multiple lobes, multiple sinuses, and even the margins of the leaf, whether they're serrated or smooth. But that's more detail, the other different characteristics, depending on how deep you go into these different tree keys. Now that you're aware of the different traits or phenotype characteristics of leaves, now you can use tree keys. This is an online one that is provided through NC State, and I've listed the URL here in the slide, but you have a choice of using a book form key or an online. The book forms are a lot more detailed, but this is a good first start that NC State tries to help you narrow down through looking at the different characteristics and coming down and identifying a particular tree basically by looking at its leaves. Now, as described in the Scout Handbook, there are other ways in which a scout can demonstrate his knowledge of different plants is with his smartphone. Though it's not my preferred way to do it, but I can understand in cases where you can't get around or you're on campouts or so, and a scout wants to review this requirement. So the way I do it, a scout can go and tell him to go take a bunch of photos of plants and trees in his neighborhood, put them on a smartphone, have him put a bunch on there, and then have him sit with you and y'all walk through those photos together and discuss, first of all, what kind of tree or plant it is he's looking at, and then dig into what value it is. What does it provide in nature? Maybe he's taking some pictures of some acorns. I says, well, what are those for? Who eats those? But the whole point is for him to go through this and understand the value of plants and trees in nature. And you can discuss that with him while you're looking at these pictures of leaves on a smartphone. Okay, I'm going to start going through a bunch of common plants that you're likely to see in this area of central North Carolina. So the first one, and what I like to do is show you and really to show scouts are the things that stick you and stab you that they'll remember. But right here we got blackberry. It's very common, and you'll see it's got thorns on it and the different type of leaves. It grows in open areas, usually along roads, anywhere there's a lot of sunlight or areas been cut over, but it's great food and cover. But one thing I want to stress, even though you know that's what those are, those blackberries, and how yummy they are, don't eat them. When you start eating them, scouts are going to want to eat them, and there's going to be a bunch of other different berries you may come across, but it's just a good idea that you or somebody may get the wrong berry and it may be toxic. As much as you know it, but then some scout will start, when they see berries, after they see you eat one, they may go grab something and it's bad. Just don't do it. So that's your first one. It's common, blackberry. Next up is American holly. Another one that'll stick you. I don't see how anybody could not remember this one. It's so typical. It's evergreen, very common as a landscaping. Another thing I wanted to add, just like I mentioned with blackberry, you can discuss that a lot of different plants that have berries like blackberry and everything are a form of cover. A lot of animals seek shelter in them from predators because predators come after them, they get stuck. So it's another good discussion to explain the role of different things in plants and the way they're incorporated into nature and habitat among different animals. Okay, American holly. Next up, eastern red cedar. It's another evergreen. Very easy to identify. Birds love the berries. Humans, I don't know, just don't do it like I've mentioned. But some things you can tell them about this is, like you see a cedar out in the open field. How did it get there? Well, a bird. A bird was eating it, and in most cases he pooped it or might have dropped that berry. But particularly red cedar, the berry has to go through its digestive system, and it kind of prepares that berry or seed for germination. That's why you'll see eastern red cedars all along fence lines out in the rural area, is you'll have birds sitting there socializing, eating berries, and dropping their droppings there beneath the fence. And next you know, you start seeing over years eastern red cedar growing all along the fence lines. Eastern red cedar, another easy one to identify. Loblolly pine, another common pine in central North Carolina. There are multiple pines. There's loblolly pine, shortleaf pine, slash pine, longleaf pine, which is the state pine for North Carolina. But it's got 3 needles per fascicle, but very easy to identify. If you can just get the scout to look at the thing, the needles, and say pine, that's good enough. It's evergreen and very easy to identify even in winter. Sweet gum, another very common deciduous tree in central North Carolina. This one I think should be real easy to identify, but a lot of people get it confused and say, oh, it's maple. Looking at the leaf, looking starlight. But the big difference about sweet gum and maple is it's alternate in its branching pattern. And also look at the leaf, it's palmate. So that's a characteristic. It's got serrated edges along the margins. But sweet gum and the sweet gum balls are a dead giveaway. So that one is really another one that you shouldn't have any problem. Just try not to get it confused with maple. Now here's your maple, red maple. There are a lot of maples in North Carolina, but just getting maple identified is good enough. The big thing to recognize how it's different is it's opposite. Look at the picture and notice how the petioles attached to the branch are opposite each other. Now don't get confused. Sometimes you'll look at it and it may be broke off and you'll see one further down on the other side, but look at it closely. It's opposite. You can see the number of lobes in it. And another big thing, in early spring, it's one of the first to come out and flower. You can see the type of flowering that are clustered along the branch. And then its seeds are really cool. They're winged samaras. And that's all a discussion how Mother Nature, when those things detach from the tree, they float away and spinning away to get as far away as they can from the mother tree to have a place to germinate and have to compete with mom. Red maple, another easy one, common tree to identify. Here's a very common plant found in bottoms, fern. This one's Christmas fern, but it's very common, easy to identify, found in rich, moist soils, shady areas, usually down around creeks in that area, but you should have no problem identifying this very popular evergreen ground cover plant. Finally, we come along with American sycamore. It's one of my favorite trees. Very easy to identify. Notice there's those palmate leaves. Notice how the petiole goes and you see finger-like projections going out to each of the major lobes. So it looks like a palm. One other thing is about the petiole, down there at the bottom where it attaches to the branch, it's swollen. And actually that swollen area of the leaf is covering next year's bud or leaf bud. And it's kind of neat to show that to scouts. They have those balls, but they're not spiny like sweet gum. But you may see those. Look at the bark, the very white bark, particularly as the tree gets older on the upper regions of the tree. It's flaky, looks pilly, freckly, but easy to identify. American sycamore. Next we have greenbrier, also known as smilex. This is one of those I like to show to the scouts because it'll hurt you. It'll stick you. It is almost cable-like the way it grows along the ground on the forest floor, and it will trip you. So it grows in open areas. It does have berries. It's very thorny, and it's a great place a lot of predators like to go, especially when it gets real clumpy, to go and hide from predators. Another one that will stick you, evergreen, easy to identify, greenbrier. Next we have Virginia creeper. It's another one of those climbing vines, and sometimes it's confused with poison ivy because the two lower leaves sometimes break off, and then you got those three sitting there whirled out that look like poison ivy. But it's best, like I say, it's a vine, leave it alone. You may not know for sure. And look at the berries. Definitely has berries, not like poison ivy, but again, don't eat the berries. Don't let the scouts eat the berries. But Virginia creeper, it has beautiful foliage, and it is a vine, and you'll see it sometimes growing along with poison ivy on a tree. Next we have winged sumac. It is a beautiful shrub, can get somewhat close to the size of a tree in some cases, but notice the compound leaf. It's leaves with on a leaf petio. The berries are a treasure for wildlife and birds. They love them. So it's a great food for wildlife. The foliage in the winter turns red, then purple. You'll see it growing along the road in open areas, but you can see why it's called winged. Look how it's kind of got winged areas along the petio that stick out. But those berries are very distinctive, and you'll see them just perched and sticking up there on the plant in the fall. Winged sumac. Here we have another climbing vine, trumpet creeper. Definitely distinctive when you see those flowers looking like a trumpet. They're beautiful, and you'll see them. I know you've seen them. And it's a vine. You'll see it growing along with a lot of other vines on the pines and different trees. Could be you'll see some poison ivy growing with it, or Virginia creeper. But look at the leaf. Look how it's very distinct, skinny petio, compound leaf, leaves upon a leaf, and each of those have a typical apical point on any of the subleaves, but easy to identify. Trumpet creeper. Okay, now for the next several slides, I'm going to cover all the most common poisonous plants in this area, when I mean central North Carolina. And I'm going to start with one of the most popular, talked about one. Everybody hears of it. If it's three, let it be poison ivy. It's a vine. It could be growing on the ground too. If you see a vine on a tree that's got fuzz on it, chances are it's poison ivy. It's got the berries. Leave it alone. Don't eat the berries. Stay away from it. And wear long pants if you're going to be walking through a lot of brush. Next we have poison oak, and yes, it does kind of look like an oak leaf. Notice how the lobes are a little more rounded, not as pointed as poison ivy. But if it's three, let it be. It's a common vine too, but I see it more along the ground, and there's those berries. Remember, poison oak looks a lot like poison ivy. If it's three, let it be poison oak. Pokeweed. This is another one, but very, very bad. I always think of poke salad that you heard of, but anyway, leave it alone. Every part of this thing is toxic to dogs and cats. I've had clients or farmers, they keep it out of the fields. They don't want their cows eating it. It will mess you up, but it is attractive and unique with all the purple berries and the purple stems, and you'll see it, and it kind of breaks real easy. But pokeweed, if you see it, leave it alone, because it has many toxic parts. Rhododendron. I'm sure everybody recognizes this. It's evergreen, great understory plant. You'll see shade tolerant. You'll see it a lot if you go hiking up in the mountains of, western North Carolina. But anyway, yeah, it's toxic, but I can't see anybody like eating it. But the main thing here, recognize it's a beautiful plant, but it is in the category of one of the many toxic plants that really surprised me. Something so beautiful could be toxic. But rhododendron, another easy one to identify. Here's another one that surprised me. Yellow jasmine, as beautiful as it is, and for me, when I first saw it, reminded me of honeysuckle. As a kid, we used to see honeysuckle growing kind of like a vine, and you'd pick it and kind of pull out the long piece of the plant and lick the sweet honey nectar. But don't do it. Don't even think of it. But this one is toxic. Even the bees. It's a fast-growing vine-like plant. Some people cultivate it, but not me. But beware of yellow jasmine. And it's just terrible to the fact that, it can be toxic to bees and come back and weaken the hive. Treatments when exposed to poisonous plants. So I'm just going to run through these, but as you can see here at the top of the list, best is avoidance. Don't touch or eat. Wear long pants, especially when hiking off the trail. I prefer to wear long pants all the time. It's just a good thing. Wash immediately with soap and water. Grab an Nalgene or whatever the scouts got. Just wash it off. And if you got some soap, do that. We know you shouldn't itch it, but my favorite's calamine lotion, stuff like that. Severe reaction, eyes. A lot of people have allergies, even not having anything to do with, plants, just that time of the year. But when you look here, the big thing, we got the National Poison Control Center number here. Have it written somewhere just in case you need it. And then definitely if someone's having trouble breathing, 911, you hope to heck you never have something like that happen. I'm actually more worried about bee stings, because how in the heck do you ever know if someone's allergic if you've never been stung? But anyway, there's a website listed here from the poisoncontrol.org, so check that out. But again, this is some of the standard procedures and things to do when exposed and having allergic reactions and stuff. But best avoid it. Finally, here are the resources that are available to you. The Scout Handbook is great. I strongly encourage you to review that. Make sure the Scouts review it, but it really is good. They've continually updated it so you can go to the particular session, of the book. I did with a lot of the different things I discussed here in this presentation. But the other thing I want to cover is the evolution of different apps that are coming out. Now, I'm on the fence with this. I prefer the old way where you actually look at the plant and be able to identify, through the dichotomous tree key, so you know the traits. But anyway, they're here. There's PlantNet, which is currently free. Picture this. It's free, but it teases you to get a premium version if you want to go deeper. And then LeafSnap. But literally, you take a picture of the leaf, and it will tell you, for the most cases, the genus, get down to that area of it. But it does that quite well, and it has to kind of key in on your location on your phone, so it uses that location to know what part of the country you're in to even give you the proper set of plants that are in that area. But anyway, those are the resources, and good luck with using those, and that's all I wanted to share with you about the resources. Okay, that's all, folks. Thanks for listening to this long presentation about plant identification, and I hope it wasn't too boring. I tried to do whatever I could to give you some tips to make it interesting when delivering to scouts. But here I've listed where this information can be found. I've created a YouTube channel for basically Troop 209, but I'll be adding more stuff to it. But you'll see this presentation and another one on animal identification, and maybe a few more in the near future. And also, if you want to know more about forestry, I have a forester channel, and I've been editing information on it that's really targeted a lot for anyone wanting to know more about the science and profession of forestry, and any scouts that want to know a little bit more about forestry associated with earning the forestry merit badge. But thank you, and have a great day.